On today's episode of Locked On Wild, I'm rolling my sleeves up. We're figuring out this bottom six.
Hey, this is Matt Boldy, and you're listening to Locked On Wild.
You're Locked On Wild, your daily podcast on the Minnesota Wild. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's happening, everybody? Welcome into another episode of Locked On Wild, your daily Minnesota Wild podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. We are your team each and every day, and we thank you for making Locked On Wild your first listen each and every day as well. Make sure you subscribe on YouTube and your favorite podcast platforms so you don't miss out on any new episodes throughout the week. On today's episode of Locked On Wild, we are going to try to figure out what the bottom six looks like given what is on the roster right now. Who's on the third line? Who's on the fourth line? We'll take a look at the D as well, and we'll talk about the goalie situation here today. My name is Seth Toupal, host of Locked On Wild, host of Seth on Sports, and credentialed media member. And we've talked a lot about what the Minnesota Wild could have, depending on how things go in free agency. Have not spent a second looking at what they do have to try to get a picture of what things look at right now. So we're going to do a very, very, very early look at the roster to try to figure out what this looks like, what this roster looks like heading into next season. Now, what I am going to do is I'm going to focus on players that are on roster right now with contracts. I will put Marco Rossi into this because he is a restricted free agent. And as Alex and I will talk about on Monday, there is not as robust of a market, at least at this point, as Bill Guerin had been hoping for. At least not as many teams willing to meet the request for a return that Guerin is hoping to receive for Marco Rossi. Now, I'll throw the heavy caveat in that we have not even hit the offseason yet, and that once the Stanley Cup final is done, talks are going to really ramp up, especially around the draft. There are going to be some moves made in and around the draft. We did see the New York Rangers again get bailed out by the Anaheim Ducks earlier this week as Chris Kreider is headed to the Ducks. And honestly, as much as I mentioned that Bill Guerin kind of lays in the weeds, does stuff that we haven't discussed, was hoping that Chris Kreider was not going to be, let's add a vet to the top six. Not that Kreider can't potentially bring something, but it just, to me, a player coming off of a year like that is a rebound candidate for sure, but I'd rather see somebody else make a bet like that. So was glad to see that the Minnesota Wild didn't get involved there. But what I will remind you is that there are teams willing to take on bad money. The Ducks took on the entirety of the Kreider contract. Rangers didn't have to retain a thing. They just, why not? So something to keep in mind as we move through the rest of the offseason. Now, I want to talk about what this roster looks like right now, because there are going to be some moves made via trade, via free agency. The pool in free agency is not all that great, assuming that many of the key facets of it either re-sign or go for top dollar. You don't have a ton of options to be able to, make impact upgrades. So a lot of what is going to be done, with the exception of, I think, probably a big move to bolster the top six, a lot of what is going to be done is going to be on the backs of fill from within, which I think a lot of people would be perfectly fine with, considering who is likely to fill those spots. So let's start on defense, because we're going to need some time to figure out the forward group to say the least. So on the roster right now for the Minnesota Wild, you've got Brock Faber, you've got Jared Spurgeon, you got Jonas Brodin, Jake Middleton, Zach Bogosian, Ziv Buium, David Jiricek. Declan Chisholm is a restricted free agent. So that is, by my math, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. If you are carrying a full 8 players. And by the way, I don't think we're going to have to deal with anymore just the penny pinching that the Wild have had to do the last few years to even get players on the roster. I don't get the sense that that's going to be as much of an issue. At least I hope it isn't, because that has been honestly painful the last couple of seasons. So here's where we stand right now. Your top 4 are pretty obvious. Faber, Spurgeon, Brodin, Middleton, they're all in. That's your top 4. And you're not going to, those are going to be your heavy hitters, your big time lifters for the Minnesota Wild, and that's how that's going to go. You have Zach Bogosian, who was the third pairing complement to John Merrill for basically the entirety of the season. John Merrill did get rotated out for Ziv Buium in the playoffs against Vegas, then back in. John Merrill is an unrestricted free agent, and given the names that are on the back end of this roster, I don't get the sense that he's going to come back. Declan Chisholm is a restricted free agent. I would like to have him back. Chisholm was very effective depending on who he was paired with over this past year, and he's kind of a super utility guy. Like, he slotted in the top 4. And when he was paired with Jared Spurgeon, when he was paired with Jonas Brodin, he did pretty dang good. When he was on the third pairing, the numbers were not so good, but I think we can probably make our own assumptions from that. So the big question with this group is going to be what happens on that third pairing. Do you go with Zach Bogosian and Ziv Buium? Do you go with David Jiricek and Ziv Buium? Do you mix Declan Chisholm in as well? What I do know is that the Wild will not get through the season with the same 7 defensemen all year. It's not possible. It will not happen. So it would not surprise me if we see all of the names that I mentioned at some point, depending on if Declan Chisholm is back. If he's not, then there will be some names at Iowa that get extended looks as well. You can't get through a season on 7 defensemen. I would challenge you to find any team that has found a way to be able to do that. Me personally, I would love to see Buium and Jiricek get paired up together to at least get a taste, at least get a look as to how they're doing, to kind of fill out that back end of the D. Now, what I'm going to say here, because this 100% factors in, and I know there is going to be chatter on today's episode about, you got to pair Ziv with somebody like Jonas Brodin. They're both left shot defensemen. It's not an end all be all, but to make the puzzle pieces fit nicely together, it makes the most sense to pair a right and a left. Brock Faber, Jared Spurgeon, Zach Bogosian, and David Jiricek are your right shot defensemen. So I would imagine that none of those players will be paired together. They will all be on a particular pairing. Jonas Brodin, Jake Middleton, Ziv Buium, and Declan Chisholm are your left shot defensemen. So you can mix and match. And if you wanted to give Ziv Buium some protection, per se, you could put him with Jared Spurgeon. But you're going to get some combination of Faber, Spurgeon, Brodin, Middleton, as your top four, most likely. They're your best defensemen. They're going to play the most minutes. That's how that all works out. So we've got what is likely going to be a three-way battle for the third pairing. Any combination of Zach Bogosian, Ziv Buium, David Jiricek, at least right now. If Chisholm stays, you throw him into the mix as well. What the hope is, and this is why I've been so pointed about waiting to see how this stuff all plays out before I super react to it, is if Ziv has a fantastic training camp. If he comes in, he looks the part, puts in work all off season, gets to training camp, wins a roster spot, then he needs to start. He needs to be in the lineup on a nightly basis. The same thing goes for David Jiricek. If he has put in time all off season and has been skating like crazy, he comes in, he looks the part, and he impresses in training camp, he needs to win a spot. Zach Bogosian is 34, and I know Bogosian has come in as, part of the, hey, I won a cup group. And I'll be honest, the analytical numbers for Zach Bogosian have been pretty good the last couple of years. But I feel like at this point, if Ziv and Jiricek take a step up in their development, they can just offer you more. Plain and simple. They can just offer you more from an offensive standpoint, from a ability to move the puck around. You may not pair them together, but they do warrant being in the lineup. So on defense, it doesn't feel like this Wild team needs to really do a whole lot. And if there are injuries, you've got Carson Lambos down in Iowa. You've got other names down in Iowa that can certainly step in on the back end and help you out. But it feels like the defense is pretty well set at this point. You don't even really need to take flyers on guys. There will be a couple of players, I'm sure, that are signed to deals for the Iowa Wilds. I would be perfectly fine with a veteran defenseman or two, a veteran of AHL play, to help lead that young group down in Iowa. I think that is a massive need for that team. So if the Wild do have a couple of two-way contracts they sign for more veteran defensemen, sign me up. I am absolutely on board for that. Somebody that can show all those young prospects down there the way and what to do and how to do it. I would be perfectly on board for that. But on the NHL side, it doesn't feel like the Wild really have much other than Declan Chisholm that they need to worry about. And Chisholm won't happen until after the likes of Marco Rossi's deal, and so on, because Declan Chisholm is arbitration eligible. And so you could go that route if you need to bring him back on the roster, but you've got his rights. So feels like that will happen at some point during the offseason, but defense feels pretty much set. And if the younger pieces of it impress in camp, slot them into the lineup. Now, as far as the forwards go, that's a much more interesting conversation. So we will take a look at the forward groups and try to figure out what the line combinations are going to look like on the third and the fourth line. That's on the way as we continue today's episode of Locked On Wilds after this. Welcome back to today's episode of Locked On Wild. We are brought to you today by Wonderful Pistachios. Are you looking for a snack that's both delicious and nutritious? Crack into a good source of protein with Wonderful Pistachios. Wonderful Pistachios is one of the highest protein nuts there is. Each 1 ounce serving has 6 grams of protein, giving you over 10% of your daily value. Plus, they're also packed with fiber and better for you unsaturated fats to help keep you feeling fuller longer. I have my Tupperware container of honey roasted, no shells, Wonderful Pistachios. And so anytime I get the need for a little snack, I grab a handful or two, and I don't have to feel bad eating them. I call them my guilt-free snack. I don't have to feel bad because they are great for you and they are full of protein. So get snacking and get cracking with the snack that packs a protein punch. Visit wonderfulpistachios.com to learn more. Welcome back to today's episode of Locked On Wild. Once again, we thank you for making Locked On Wild your first listen each and every day. A reminder for you, our next live show is Monday night at 8 p.m., the show that all of you tune in on a weekly basis to see. By far the most popular show of the week here on Locked On Wild. So tune in for Denny's thoughts. Got some more trade proposals to take a look at. You are not going to want to miss this episode, 8 p.m. Monday night. You never do, because it's the one that everybody tunes in for every single week here on Locked On Wild. Let's take a look at the forward group. And again, we're just going with the players that are on the roster right now, trying to kind of set up, like, what does it look like before the moves are made? As of right now on the roster, you have Kirill Kaprizov, Matt Boldy, Eriksson Ek, Mats Zuccarello, Marcus Foligno, Ryan Hartman, Yakov Trenin, Freddie Gaudreau, Liam Ohgren, Marcus Johansson, Vinnie Hinostroza, and Danila Yurov, who signed his ELC. He will be making his way to the States. He may already be here, but he will be part of the mix as well for the Wild for next season. So what do the lines look like? Well, we know 4 players for sure that'll be in the top 6. Kaprizov, Boldy, Eriksson Ek, Zuccarello. Those 4 for sure. I will add, because he's still here and he's a restricted free agent, I'll add Marco Rossi into this mix as of right now. So put Marco Rossi in there and then put Danila Yurov in that mix as well. There's 6 right there. And maybe for the sake of this exercise, it's easiest to just go with you either go with the combination of Kaprizov, Boldy, Eriksson Ek, and then Zuccarello, Rossi, Yurov could be your 2 possible line combinations, or you go Kaprizov, Rossi, Zuccarello, Yurov, Eriksson Ek, Boldy. But we know that Rossi's not likely to be here. So let's just focus on the 5. So Kaprizov, Eriksson Ek, Zuccarello, Boldy, and Yurov. And it feels like, depending on what the ad is in the top 6, it feels like you are in position to, I kind of dig from a deepening the lineup perspective. I kind of dig the potential of Kaprizov, Yurov, Zuccarello. And then if your ad is a wing, you go that wing, Eriksson Ek, Boldy. It's a lot of pressure to ask for a guy playing in his first games in the NHL. So don't be surprised if, at least initially, Eriksson Ek, again, depending on the ad, Eriksson Ek is your top center. Yurov, your number 2. Don't be surprised if Eriksson Ek and Boldy are split up, at least at the start of the season. Unless you get somebody that you feel comfortable throwing on that second line with Mats Zuccarello. Who knows? It really depends on what that mystery box is for this Minnesota Wild team. Now let's talk about the 3rd line and the 4th line. Here are the players that should factor most into the bottom 6 this year. Marcus Foligno, Ryan Hartman, Yakov Trenin, Freddie Gaudreau, Vinnie Hinostroza, Marcus Johansson. Should all be factoring mostly in to the bottom 6. And I also I misspoke somewhat. Let's just throw Liam Ohgren on that second line wing spot, at least for right now. So Kaprizov, Eriksson Ek, and Boldy with Ohgren, Yurov, Zuccarello? Question mark. Again, it's a lot to ask for young players in Liam Ohgren, who is 21. Danila Yurov, who's in his early 20s. So don't be surprised if we do see some juggling. And if needed, if somebody from said bottom six role is elevated, Ryan Hartman is capable in a pinch, I would not go too far into the pool. I don't know if I would, well, he's done it before, so let's just pencil Marcus Johansson in there. I'm not going to do that this year. But here's what I'm kind of thinking for third and fourth line. And bear with me on this, because this is just right off the top of my head. How do we feel about a third line of Marcus Foligno, Ryan Hartman, and Vinnie Hinostroza? You're looking for kind of a brittle pit bull type third line. Foligno has shown that he is capable of getting to the net and kind of being that in close guy for that group. Hinostroza is a battler. He can battle on the boards, and he may keep Ryan Hartman out of some trouble. Hartman can certainly let it rip himself. And then your fourth line is something like Freddie Gaudreau, Marcus Johansson, and Yakov Trenyan. See, this is what I talked about earlier for the everydayers. I'm hoping that you followed on this exact rabbit hole I'm going right now. This is kind of what I talked about after the Wild loss to the Golden Knights. Is it doesn't feel like that third and fourth line have a fleshed out identity. You know, like it feels like it's just a collection of guys that you're like, well, these guys don't really fit in the top six, so we'll put them down lower. I think back to 2021, 2022, which I know is mostly an aberration, but I think it also gave you a really good exercise as to what it looks like to build and have like a quality depth lineup. You had the Grief line as your third line, which included Marcus Foligno, Joel Eriksson Ek, and Jordan Greenway. And the goal for that line was to choke the life out of the top the top offensive option for the opponent. That was their job. That was their role. You had the Deweys and Mason Shaw or otherwise as the center, and those guys are just going to fly around the ice and play kind of that vibes change of pace role. The third and the fourth pairing just feel like kind of a collection of players at this point. And so if you try, Hartman, Foligno, I just envision kind of that like tough, like if you run into me in an alley, we're gonna have problems. We're gonna exchange fists type thing. But then your fourth line doesn't really work with Trenyan, Johansson, and Freddie. So you ultimately probably have to switch Hinostroza to a fourth line guy and put Trenyan up with Foligno. And I don't know if I really like that either. So this, again, kind of circles back to like, I'd like to see a little identity out of that bottom six to complement what the top two lines are doing. And ultimately, you're probably going to have to convert one of the third and the fourth lines to a line that can give you some punch, some scoring punch. But that's why I put Hartman there as the 3C. Even though Freddie Gaudreau scored more goals than Hartman did this past year, I still feel like Hartman is the more offensive inclined option between the two. So my attempt to uncloud the water appears to have not unclouded it nearly as much as I had hoped. But that is, I think, at least a little bit more of a manageable look at this picture for the defense and the offense based off of what is on the roster right now. It may be that you have to clear a spot to just uncloud it a little bit. But we still have a couple of weeks before free agency begins. I think things will pick up around the draft as far as trades go. So we'll get some league business here, and then we'll start to see some moves made as we get closer to the start of the league year. I'm going to talk a little bit about the goalie picture to finish today's episode. We know it's going to be Filip Gustavsson. What does the rest of the goalie picture have in store? We will discuss as we finish today's episode of Locked On Wild after this. Final segment of today's episode of Locked On Wild. Once again, we thank you for making Locked On Wild your first listen each and every day. Again, make sure to hit the like button and subscribe here on YouTube, or follow us on your favorite podcast platforms so you don't miss out on any new episodes throughout the week. 2 subs away from 3,400. Let's see if we can get that on today's episode. All right, so the goalie picture. We know Filip Gustavsson is going to be a major player in that. I would love to see Filip Gustavsson get signed to a new deal. I think he is what you would classify as a franchise goalie. I mean, in 2 of the last 3 seasons, he has finished in the top 10 in basically every statistical category that there is. And in one of those 2 seasons, he was in the top 5 in all of them. So, in the great words of Pete DeBoer, I feel like that's a big enough sample size now that he's getting requisite amounts of starts. So, Filip Gustavsson penciled in as your number 1. Jesper Wallstedt is your number 2 right now, and I don't think that's going to change heading into the season because Jesper's deal for the next 2 seasons is a full one-way contract. So it is a full NHL contract that he has signed. Jesper's been pretty vocal about what all went wrong this past year, you know, the mental side of the game. And I think that's why we saw the Wild so adamant about wanting to see, like, how do you bounce back? Like, how do you bounce back after adverse starts, adverse games? That's a big piece of this puzzle. And I think that was the piece that Jesper did not have yet in his arsenal. Not suggesting that he was, you know, tanking starts or the Wild were tanking his starts or anything like that. But, you know, it's one of those things that you can't really teach until you're in it. You can't really learn how to deal with adversity and hardship until you're in adversity and hardship. So I feel like if he gets the mental side of things ironclad this offseason, I think he's going to be in just a fine spot to be able to step in and be the number 2 on this team. I also believe, for the same reason that I said with the defenseman, that you're not going to get through the season with 7 defensemen, you're likely not going to get through the season with 2 goalies. So a third goalie of some sort that can be down in Iowa and is fine with being down there until needed to back up which of the 2 goalies is healthy. If Jesper Wallstedt gets hurt, then you can have him come up and back up Filip Gustavsson. If Filip Gustavsson gets hurt, then you can have him come up and back up Jesper Wallstedt. You don't need to add a goalie to the depth chart that takes starts away. That's not the goal here. That's not the objective. The goal is to make sure that you have a healthy body so that in the event that things go cataclysmically wrong from an injury perspective, which they basically have the last 2 seasons, that you aren't in full-out panic mode. Could Samuel Levi do that? Potentially. He potentially could. He also has never made a start at the NHL level before. So I feel like having somebody that at least knows what it's like would be a good idea for the Wild here as this offseason rolls along. But it's still going to be Filip Gustavsson and Jesper Wallstedt as your 1-2 next year. And it'll be a 1 and a 2. Gustafsson's going to get probably 50 starts, 55 starts, and Jesper will get the rest. So the roster picture is semi-clear, but the hope is that there are some big, or at least some ads that are added into this mix, or you're trotting out basically the same team for the 4th straight season. And that's going to get people a little antsy, to say the least. So defensively, pretty much set. Forward group is contingent on what happens with young Marco Rossi. Although, as Michael Russo and Joe Smith noted, as I mentioned at the beginning of the show today, the trade waters are pretty quiet as of right now. Now, that could change in the next week or 2, but as of right now, waters are a little quiet. So we'll see what happens there. But I just hope that we don't get to the point with a player like Rossi where you trade him to trade him. That's my only concern, is that we've gone so far down this road, there's no choice. So we got to take whatever we can get. But the offseason continues. So that's our episode for today. Again, appreciate everybody tuning in as you do each and every day of the week. Make sure to subscribe so you don't miss out on any new episodes of Locked on Wild by sticking with us on YouTube and your favorite podcast platforms as well. You can find new episodes every Monday through Friday as part of the Locked On Podcast Network. We are your team each and every day.